Okay, let's, are we up?
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We are about to begin. Once again, please take your seats. Thank you.
Okay, let's please get together for this last sequence of 3 parts. I have kind of like a TED Talk. I think I have 18 minutes or 16, so this is good. And I also, an interesting dilemma because we were required to provide the slides last week before the conference. So I had to, in a sense, infer what I'm likely to see. And I have to say it's congruent and it surpassed my expectations. So I have 7 or 8 slides to frame this that I think takes us beyond today. The theme, and I mean this literally, that this is a tipping point, almost month, but certainly period of time, these 2 or 3 months, leading into the next part, that I'm going to shape as a transformational rapid. And this isn't because there's some grand theory, although I'm sure it will fit one. It's because of the nature of the work that we do, a lot of people in this room, and our colleagues. And it goes like this. The modus operandi is to partner with levels of the system and do something. And then after you do enough of it, you write a book about it. And then you do it better the next time, and you write a better book. And so that's how Andy's 30 books got done. That's how our work got done. Going from, so pretty soon there's no distinction between theory and practice. It's constantly feeding on each other. So this is why we're so confident of the trends. The trends are not controllable, but they're identifiable, and they can be influenced. I want to take you into this, what we call deep learning for turbulent times. Just a few slides, and I'm going to start with something a little bit abstract, but it's not. It really captures our work in this province, other places, has been about whole system change. Whole system change means what it says, the entire state, province, district, country. Not just a district, certainly not just a school, but the entire system. It always has a teaching and learning center of gravity, leading to causal pathways to, I'm going to say, measurable outcomes, but the new measurable outcomes. So it's got systemness, it's got learning as its center of gravity, and it's got really a content of this. And this is when I step back in terms of how this is happening now. And I guess about, I think it was 20 years ago, I wrote the trilogy on change forces based on complexity theory or chaos theory. And chaos theory basically says things are out of control, the patterns are everywhere or nowhere, but some of the forces start to connect. And sometimes we help those forces connect, but some they connect almost on their own and we leverage them. And this is how I see, in real terms, the system that's happening now and should happen more. And it's, if you think of it, I'm just thinking of 3 levels. The center or the top, which is, let's say, the government. The middle, which are the districts, schools laterally. And then the bottom, which is the individual students and communities. So I'm going to say that in this, we're making sense of it now, the top frames the direction. And I think that still is up for a challenge. We're seeing, in terms of the new, speaking of curriculum documents, the curriculum revisions in Finland, British Columbia, New Zealand, Victoria in Australia, Ontario. They are moving towards versions of the 6 Cs. So they're framing the direction in broader ways. So the top frames. Secondly, the middle strengthens. The quality of the middle, knowing what they're doing. This is intra-district, inter-district, inter-school, schools as networks laterally. So there's a stronger focus in the middle that begins to make that middle more effective in its own right, better partners upwards to the state, which means you don't do what you're told. You're proactive about the policies. You don't think of, I have to implement policies, instead you think, I have to exploit them for what is good for this, for our community. So there's a very strong proactive strength of the middle as well as its internal learning. And then thirdly, the bottom liberates. So you think of this dynamic, and we were in last week, Andy and I and others, in Bogota, looking at some of the grassroots innovations there in rural areas. And you can see in those that there, the bottom is pushing up to push for change in the system. Sometimes it's the reverse. It can start anywhere, but it has to encompass all three of these levels, and to do it in a way that has them interactive, that has them autonomous plus connected, and the dynamics of that. The fundamental strategy, and this is very clear in this conference. It was so clear, so crystal clear. It has to do with two things, and this is in our work now, this is our, I guess I'll say, our mission statement, our core. We didn't have it when we started the pedagogies for deep learning. We got it as a result of the work with almost 1,000 schools now in 10 different countries. And what it looks like is this. The fundamental strategy is engage the world. You heard this so many different good ways. Engage the world. This is not now studying something that's going to happen next year. It's studying something that's happening today. So you're engaging the world, the hands-on stuff, all that learning. But the purpose to engage the world is this. It's to change the world. This equation, engage the world to change the world, is the centerpiece of this new work. I'm going to say, if you think about the whole conference and you apply that frame to what you saw and participated in, you will draw that same conclusion. Engaging the world to change the world has two beautiful content. One is you learn a hell of a lot. You become passionate, you learn, and you get smarter, and you get wiser about bigger things in that. And not only do you learn a lot, you also start to be immediately with your colleagues influential. You start to shape the future. And this is why, along with other reasons, I call it a transformative time, because we're now at the beginning of seeing this pay off. It really is John Dewey. John Dewey, education is not preparation for life, it's life itself. This is so clear. It took 100 years to get, come to what it looked like, but it's starting to look like now, and it's got so much dynamic potential. Apologies to Paulo Freire, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. I'm calling the work that we do now the pedagogy of the surpassed. In other words, it's causing things to happen at a level and a combination that couldn't possibly be imagined without this new combination. And I'm going to give you some of the elements that we are seeing. We're helping to cause these. More accurately, we're seeing them caused by students and teachers and other elements of the system, parents now more recently in community, and then we're appreciating that and leveraging it. And some of the pieces of this are these. The focus is on deep problems. Again, I don't have to convince you of this conference of that. One element of the pedagogy of the surpassed. Surpassed means you've learned more than you've ever learned in your life, individually and collectively. Second one, partnerships and co-learning. Pretty obvious that this is how, whether it's vertical or lateral, there's a lot of cross-cutting learning going on. Students and teachers as change agents. Remember, I wrote this last week. Well, I wrote it last month, the month before that. This is what you see naturally. You could predict this week because you could see, you could read the tea leaves of what were happening, and you could predict this kind of conference once you organize it in a way that students feature in it. Parents and communities pitch in. When we started with our learning partnership, we called it this. It's a new learning partnership and relationship between and among students and teachers. We did that for a year, and then we changed the definition to say between and among students, teachers, and families and communities. So that triangle of learning is going on. And then equity outcomes never before achieved. We talk a lot about equity and excellence, and Andy has had one of the better formulations where he said invest in equity and you'll get excellence. But now I'm seeing in this new work that what is happening, partly because we focus on it, is that excellence is definitely improving. If you think of getting wise on the 6 C's as a quantum step forward on excellence, but you also see equity, and I want to talk about in a minute what we call now the equity hypothesis. So these are the elements of surpassing the learning that's never been accomplished before. This is our global network. I just give you the map to show you the 10 countries. We have 100 or so schools in each country. They're in clusters of 10 schools here and a district there. In Ontario, there are about 17 districts engaged in this with expanding. And these are districts that come in that say, we want to go deep into learning as a system. We want to be part of a system. We want this, we come in because we're going in this direction anyways, and we want a group to be able to help shape us. We're coming in it to learn from others, not only schools in our own neighborhood, our own district, which doesn't happen all that often until you do it deliberately, but also we want to learn within our country and across countries, and that's what we're doing. We have a big deep learning hub. We call it May 1st to May 4th in Toronto. That's going to pull a lot of our learning from the last 12 months and feature it as through the students and teachers, much like you saw today, but this is a group of people working with a similar focus and learning from each other. So these 10 countries, we also see the levels connecting. Even though I wear, in one sense, 2 hats here because I'm an advisor along with the other 3 advisors to the Premier and the Minister, I'm also working on the deep learning with districts, and it's quite clear that this isn't a separate agenda, that the work that's going on at the ministry level, the work that we discussed on Monday actually with the Minister and the Deputy Minister and the group of advisors, is totally congruent with this direction. All the pieces aren't there. Assessment is still out of line a bit. Curriculum is, documents have not, need to be changed. A number of things have to be changed, but the direction is pretty clear in the agreement. So we see a compatibility at all 3 levels here. And the advice is not for one level to wait for the other. On the opening, I said you don't wait and see these days, you go and cause. Don't wait and see, go and cause. And you will find kindred spirits at the other levels, and that we'll be able to see these things come together, these possibilities. There's action, but no surety, I'm going to put it that way. That is to say, if you look at what has happened, again, I mentioned this earlier, we saw it in the last 2 weeks with the Trump election, with a number of other things, that the big picture and the small picture, the big picture being what's happening to the world, what's happening to the country, United States, what's happening in Brexit. Those big pictures, they used to be hardly known by most of the people. Now people are thinking, I see it, it's there. The big picture and me are on the same page. That's how most people think now. They know that the big picture, something big is happening. They know that it's fearful. It's got a lot of parts to it that are unknown. And they also know that nobody knows how to handle it. And those that do know how to handle it are likely wrong. So this puts everything up for grabs. This is why people have to have one foot in their community and many other feet in other parts of the system, including that combination of big and small picture being a practical element. Actions matter, and people know that what the stakes are, that they know there's big stakes now. They know that there's something has to get together. So I don't want to, mainly want to reinforce it this way and just draw this conclusion instead of adding to it, because I think this is the main point I want to make, is what you see if you examine this closely, if you look at just the indicators of the week. You see in the next, I'm going to say between 2016 and 2030, the mobilization of students en masse as multifaceted change agents. The mobilization of students en masse as multifaceted change agents. Imagine how much change could happen if you have millions and millions and millions of these. Instead of thinking of the leaders as change agents, you think of citizens, student citizens, as multiple change agents, because that's actually what they are, and you saw it again specifically. So that's not the best part. The best part, the first good part, is between 2016 and 2030. There's going to be more of an impact from this than we can imagine, and you can almost taste it this week. But the best part is that those students en masse, 1930 to 1950, will be having children, right? And what kind of children are they going to have if you think of change age? If your parents are like Shelley, you saw her thinking about her daughter. I want my daughter to grow up in a world that's not the world I grew up in. And that is going to happen. So in this half of the century, between 2016 and 2050, we will see a radical change in the world, probably for the better if we have the learners as the leaders. In 1950, I'll be 110. I made it easy for the math, incidentally. These are, all my numbers are zeros. So I'll end with a zero at least. So I won't be around, presumably 110, but I might be. In any case, you're part of something golden. It's precarious, but it's achievable. And you can control your own part of it, but best of all, you can connect with others and control big chunks of it. So I think this has been an enormously successful conference for these reasons. It's showing us the reality, not just the potential, but the reality of where we could go with this. And I have not been more excited about the possibilities in this country, including the linkage to First Nations, Métis, Inuit populations, where, as Andy said, and we're saying now as we start to work on this, that the values in FMI communities are so ahead of the values that we have in non-FMI communities, that the ability to walk in both worlds and to learn from each other is also part of changing Canada, part of Canada's work that has never been finished but has potential. And so even though we are proud of Canada, we talk about its great features, it's also it's to be appreciated on one hand, but there's so much more that could be done. We can race to the future together. Thank you very much.